Beautiful day, really. It just isn't pretty.
Beautiful, but not pretty. Well, what a way to sum up our Missoula fly-in last weekend, the first fly-in of the year. I'm Warren Morningstar. Melissa is a bit under the weather today.
And despite the uncertainties of the weather and Montana's sparse population, Missoula was one of our best attended fly-ins since we started 5 years ago.
We love the AOPA fly-ins. We've been to the last three in the Seattle or the Pacific Northwest, or I have. Yeah. He's first time.
Friday we saw the sun and some 300 aircraft arriving and some 100 campsites set up off the approach end of runway 26. All those folks streaming in despite the forecast for a soggy Saturday. But hey, plenty to do on Friday. Seminars, exhibits, and then...
He's gone away, and yesterday, now I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the Great Divide. Oh, here's that exciting.
The Friday night Barnstormers party, entertainment, good food, more than 850 folks, and a few surprises too. You might have noticed that DC-3 with a parachute canopy over the nose. She's pretty famous in these parts. This is the aircraft that dropped the smoke jumpers who perished in the Man Gulch fire in 1949. Now the folks in Missoula hope to send her on another historic mission.
We're going to fly this thing to Normandy, and we're going to participate in some historic events. And the idea is that this airplane will represent Montana, the smoke jumpers from Montana, veterans, servicemen, and women, especially those from World War II.
The Museum of Mountain Flying is raising funds to put this DC-3 back into flying condition. They hope it will join the fleet of DC-3s and C-47s in the D-Day squadron that will fly to Normandy next year to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Normandy invasion that liberated Europe. And as a kickoff to their fundraising campaign, they christened the famous bird with a new name.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce you to the new Miss Montana.
New because the name originally adorned the nose of a B-25 flown by a native son in World War II.
Well, you know, and that really looks like it's going to be a special event. They're going to be led over by Placid Lassie, which we've profiled before.
We did.
And we profiled this airplane in an earlier segment from the Museum of Mountain Flying.
We did, and the thing is, though, that, boy, it's hugely expensive to get these old airplanes ready for a trip like that. So they do have a lot of fundraising to do, and so if you feel like supporting an interesting cause that certainly will be nostalgic and a lot of history there, that would be a good one to support.
Yeah, it will be, but seeing all of those old airplanes over Normandy, and they're going to have paratroopers jumping out of them in uniform and the old round canopies. Yeah. It'll be something.
It'll be something to see. I plan to be there.
I hope I'll be there too.
Let's try to make it happen.
Okay. But while Friday was beautiful, Saturday was drenched. But still, more than 1,500 folks for breakfast, keeping our volunteer cooks, including Tom here, hopping and innovating.
We don't have any Pam. Spray Pam.
Okay then, well, unwrap lots, we mean lots of butter tabs, and keep on cooking. And while the rain kept most people away from the static display, the exhibit hall and the seminars were filled. Now the volunteers out on the field parked more than 2,300 cars. All in all, nearly 7,000 people for the first AOPA fly-in of 2018. Pretty successful, Tom.
It was. You know, we thought Missoula being, you know, kind of not heavily populated, that we wouldn't have a big crowd there. But people came out. They really wanted to come to Montana. It's such a beautiful place.
Yeah, lots of folks who flew in from a long distance, prepared for the weather, and I was amazed at the number of people who drove in.
Yeah, we had obviously people from all over.
Yep.
Good show.
It was impressive.
It was.
Well, you know, we always manage to have some interesting aircraft on display at our fly-ins, and Missoula was no exception. Like this 1928 Model 6000 Travel Air, the oldest one still flying. It was one of 10 Travel Airs flown by the legendary Johnson Flying Service of Missoula. It hauled passengers' freight and dropped smoke jumpers during some 40 years of service. Or how about this gleaming beauty? It was originally purchased in 1956 and then went to Mexico. But there is something unique about this airplane.
It's the very first 182, and its serial number is 00031. Rolled off the assembly line in January of 1956.
Now, John says there's about 3,300 hours of work in the restoration. He wouldn't say how much money. He and his wife fly it strictly VFR to tiny airports around the West, and for every flight, there's at least 2 hours of polishing.
Something we said for polished airplanes, they look great, but I'm glad I don't have to maintain.
Yeah, me too.
Well, this fly-in also featured 3 fly-outs, one over the Bob Marshall Wilderness and then to the Stonehenge Aviation Museum. Because of the weather, most drove to the Seeley Lake flyout, but the sun came out again on Sunday for the Always flyout, and our own Warren Morningstar flew along.
It was a most interesting gaggle of aircraft that landed at Libby, Montana. Everything from a Pilatus to a Cessna 152. Our 10 aircraft staged first outside Minuteman Aviation at Missoula International, and a briefing on what we could expect.
Riders come over the top of planes. It's a great time to check and make sure that oil pressure is good, temps are good, everything's running great. It is not wilderness area, but there's no service stations out there.
We get our call signs, line up, and launch.
Hallway 7, Missoula Tower, runway 30, cleared for takeoff.
Now, the stationair in front of my rental Skyhawk XP pulls ahead pretty quickly.
And Always 7, we've lost Always 6, sort of leaving us in the dust.
And the Mooney behind me has to throttle back, but it wasn't a race. And the scenery, incredible. The lead ship, the Pilatus, sends back condition reports.
Yeah, and Always 1 is now 22 miles away. We are at 8.5 and just below the cloud deck. Looks good. Libby looks like the valley is open.
And soon we've all assembled on the ground at Libby. Now, this airport was featured in Steven Spielberg's 1989 movie, Always.
I can just imagine, being here when all those aircraft were flying around, and just the activity would have been wonderful.
The production company built the wooden control tower. It didn't exist before the movie, and it had to be moved farther away from the runway after production wrapped, FAA rules. And after exploring Libby a little bit, we then overflew Bull Lake. Now, that was the location for this famous shot that opened the movie Always. We're on our way to Sandpoint, Idaho, and the Quest factory, where they build the backcountry Kodiak. And well, Tom, and after we left the Always set, we flew to Sandpoint, Idaho, and the Quest factory. Unfortunately, they wouldn't allow us to take pictures inside the factory, but it is a beautiful place, and they really build a precision airplane.
That's what I understand. It is a very impressive factory there in Idaho.
It is indeed, and I think we also we had a wonderful time at the factory, at the fly out. Everybody had a great time at the fly-in, and we want to say thanks to all the folks who stopped us to say hello.
We do. An overwhelming number of AOPA Live viewers there. It was fun to say hi to everybody.
It was indeed. So thanks, folks.